Yo, what's going on, guys? Mush back at it with another video, and I've been seeing this story make the rounds quite a bit, and it's a topic of discussion that I find rather interesting, and I feel like most people are in agreement with how they believe as far as Steam's place in the PC gaming market. However, there is this belief that some have that, hey, is Steam becoming a bit of a monopoly or a lot of a monopoly when you talk about it being something that really has a stranglehold on the PC games market? Well, coming from gamesindustry.biz, 72% of devs believe Steam has a monopoly on PC games according to study. Now, it looks like this is really from a standpoint of publishers. That's according to a new white paper from PC distribution platform Rocky titled The State of PC Game Distribution. The independent study conducted by Atomic Research surveyed 306 industry executives across the UK and USA between May 18th and May 22nd. 75% of respondents were senior managers of C-suite level, with 77% from studios with more than 50 employees. The studio found that for the majority of studios, Steam accounts for over 75% of revenue. However, it also noted that the developers have started using other platforms, including the Epic Game Store and the Xbox PC Game Store. Almost half of those surveyed, 48%, have distributed a title to both stores, while 10% have used GOG and 8% have used itch.io. Rocky does note that as its survey is dominated by larger companies with diverse portfolios, a larger proportion use storefronts like the Epic Game Store rather than itch.io, which aims to serve independent developers. Elsewhere, the study found that 32% of developers release some of their games on physical media disc, cartridges, and keys in boxes. Marketplaces like G2A and Kingwin are also an option for distribution, as are e-stores such as Fanatical and Humble Bundle. Developers highlighted benefits for both, including ease of use, pricing control, promotional support, and international reach. Data also showed that 80% of those surveyed expect to use alternative channels alongside Steam within 5 years. 75% predict they will use at least 10% uplift in revenue from using marketplaces and e-stores in particular. However, respondents voiced concerns. 75% predict they will see at least 10% uplift in revenue. New opportunities are everywhere, as noted. Now, this is talked about Steam potentially being a monopoly in the PC games sector and PC game sale, and it's a really interesting discussion point because without a shadow of a doubt, Steam is the predominant leader in the PC gaming marketplace. Nobody is going to debate that. Nobody is going to argue, there is this that's gonna be a rival competitor. No, and I think any storefront that kicks off that has the idea of, we're gonna be a rival competitor to Steam, you're dead on arrival. It's just not going to happen, especially not right out the gate. Now, can you grow? Can you build an audience? Absolutely, but you need to have your own identity, and whenever I talk about the PC game marketplace landscape, that is the number one thing. These platforms need to have their own identity because you are, generally speaking, not going to compete with Steam just based on raw strength. And when I say raw strength, I mean having a lot of resources, and the idea would be, how do we spend those resources? Well, in a narrow view, the easiest way to spend resources to try to attract people that play video games to other storefronts that are trying to be on the come up. Come on, you guys can put two and two together. You spend money to make games exclusive to your storefront. And in theory, that's a great idea. And in theory, that can be successful to an extent. However, I feel like the actual ramifications that exclusives will have on a storefront is lessening and lessening and lessening. And that doesn't just go for PC, that also goes for consoles. But I think the value of exclusives on PC, it's even more exponentially lesser in value. And why do I say that? It's because no matter how much money you spend on games, at the end of the day, you are not going to get exclusives across the board. You're not going to get every game to be exclusive, and generally speaking, and this is just how gaming works, there are not enough games you can get exclusivity deals for that are really top-level marquee titles that will make people choose one storefront over the other just based on one singular game or even a collection of games. You know what video game players have access to more than ever? That is a quantity, an immense quantity of top-level games and high-quality games. There are so many games coming out, and even if you want to say Steam from a quality standpoint, a lot of the games are garbage, filler, whatever the case may be, with the sheer quantity of games coming out, there's always good games coming out, and there's never a shortage of games to play, and ultimately, the exclusivity deals that Epic Games Store is going to sign, some of them might be beneficial, but they're on a clock, they're windowed exclusives, and everybody knows that the games will eventually come to Steam. You know what I would be so curious about? To get some data on, how many copies did Square Enix sell of Kingdom Hearts on Epic Games Store, where it was an exclusive on there for like 2 or 3 years, and how many of those copies did they sell on Steam? I bet it's pretty close, even though Steam had a 3-year delayed release or something like that. I could even see a world where Steam sold more copies than that because people just prefer inherently that Steam is the better platform. So even though you're spending all of this money on exclusives, that's not gonna be enough. People still view Steam as this worthwhile platform, and here is the kicker. Even though Steam is the leader of this industry, generally speaking, whenever an entity becomes a leader in their industry, they start taking their consumers for granted. They start implementing more anti-consumer practices. Look at what PlayStation is doing right now. They're whooping Xbox, and I think that is one of the worst things that can happen for the console industry because Sony now has so much power over their consumer. And that means, upping the price of PlayStation Plus, lessening the quality of PlayStation Plus, higher game prices, less marquee titles. And maybe you could say the biggest thing about Valve is, hey, they don't put out a lot of games anymore. But as far as the storefront goes, there's a lot of value to that storefront, and it's still an incredibly compelling storefront and the best storefront on the market, and they haven't abused their leadership in the market. At least I don't perceive that they've abused their leadership on the market in terms of impacting the consumer. If you want to argue the 30% cut that they take from developers is too much, look, I'm not a game developer. I'm not here to argue on that. However, on the back end, in terms of impacting the consumer, has Steam used their leadership in the market to do something like implement a subscription service that is mandatory for online play to play games on Steam? Have they done anything like that? Or just to access Steam, you need to spend $5 a month, but oh, by the way, we'll give you like the Vault catalog of games that a lot of people, I shouldn't say nobody really cares about the Vault catalog, but $5 a month to access. No, they haven't done any of that, and I think that they've still treated the consumer with a fair amount of respect, which is different than what a lot of industry leaders in their respective industries would do. Generally speaking, because those industry leaders end up being publicly traded companies, their goal is to make the most amount of money, but I would argue building a good level of consumer goodwill on the back end for the long-term sakes is going to make you a lot of money, but that's not easily quantifiable in the short term, so a lot of people or a lot of industry leaders do other things like up prices right out the gate because that has an immediate effect on your bottom line. But I think Steam has developed this goodwill, this trust with their consumer, that it goes a long way. And again, it's not just Epic Games Store in terms of developing exclusives and using that as a big way to draw people over. Now, Epic Games Store is the big storefront that literally threw cash at a Deep Silver, at a Square Enix to get games like Stranger of Paradise, Final Fantasy Origin, to get games like Metro Exodus to be on their storefront. And hey, congrats to the developers and publishers. They probably made a lot of money. However, looks like Epic Games Store kind of getting out of the exclusives games business. Either they're not able to get the deals done, or they just realize it's not really worth it. Although, it's not a complete no more exclusives. They still have Lords of the Fallen 2 coming out. I'm sure that'll draw a lot of people. And as I say that, I literally have a friend, a literal close friend of mine, that he's super into Souls-like games, and I told him that Lords of the Fallen 2 was going to be an Epic Games Store exclusive, and he's like, that sucks, but I'm still going to play it, and I'm going to buy it on the Epic Games Store. Like, some of these Souls-like dudes, and there's always going to be people, you're going to sell copies, it's just, is it enough copies? Alan Wake 2, I was fine with that being an exclusive because guess what? Epic Games funded the development of that game, and it exists because of Epic Games Store. No different than Valve making their own games exclusive on their storefront. I feel like that's fair game, all things considered, but I'm not a big fan of it. And Sony has done this in the past as well. They take the resources that they have, they throw X amount of dollars at a game that was gonna exist regardless. Like, don't tell me that the Final Fantasy VII Remake was not going to exist without Sony. Don't tell me that Final Fantasy 16 was not going to exist without Sony. It was going to exist, but guess what? Sony can throw X amount of dollars at a Square Enix and they can have timed exclusivity. For what? It's not like you're facilitating the creation of that game. Rather, you're just paying money to lock away the game from other storefronts and other storefronts that some people might prefer, whether that be PC, whether that be Xbox, to have it exclusive on your platform. I hate that, and I feel like that's an actual anti-consumer practice. I don't think Steam has done that many anti-consumer practices from what I can see, and on top of that, again, it's not just Epic Games Store. EA tried it, and it was EA in-house games. It's the EA in-house developed games, but look, if Battlefield couldn't draw people over, if Call of Duty and Activision couldn't draw people over to a different storefront, if, take your pick, Fallout 76, if that game and Bethesda couldn't draw people over to other storefronts, maybe it's time to look at a good hard look in the mirror and realize it matters about the features and the identity of a storefront. What is the storefront that over the past couple of years has been gaining a lot of traction? I'm not saying it's going to be a competitor to Steam. I'm not saying it's going to dethrone Steam, but that is GOG, because guess what? Above all else, unlike the Epic Games Store, unlike the EA launcher, when Origin, when that was trying to pop up, GOG has an identity that there are a certain amount of people that value. I'm sure the people at the head of GOG, they don't have these grandiose aspirations that they are going to immediately dethrone Steam and they are going to be the kings of the PC gaming marketplace. No, but they realize that there is a portion of people that is a significant audience. Maybe it's not the overwhelming majority audience, but it's a significant audience that they have desires out of the games that they can buy, and they can develop a culture around their storefront and an identity around that storefront that will separate them from Steam. Outside of the exclusives that are offered on the Epic Games Store when they were throwing money on getting those games exclusive, what separates Epic Games Store from Steam? Can you tell me? Lack of features? Is that a separating factor to juice up the Epic Games Store? I don't know. What did Origin have as dude, I remember playing games on Origin. My goodness, do not take me back to that time. That service was trash tier, and like, guess what? I was desperate to play Battlefield 3. A lot of other people were desperate to play Battlefield 3. And ultimately, all these years later, Battlefield 6, day one on Steam, and the EA Access and Origin tie-in, that's not even as big as it was. You know, it used to be, you buy a game on Steam, you gotta still launch Origin, and guess what? Ubisoft still does that, although they have even less than that. And by the way, Ubisoft tried to do it as well. How'd that turn out for you? As far as Assassin's Creed, you're talking about IPs at the level of Assassin's Creed, at the level of Call of Duty, at the level of Battlefield, trying to be the core pillars of getting other storefronts to pop off. But if the storefront itself isn't of value, if it doesn't have its identity, then it doesn't matter. Does GOG have a bevy of marquee exclusives that's really drawing people in? Sure, the preservation program is great, and getting some of these older games preserved on this platform, it's great, but it's the overall identity of GOG that's drawing people in, and that's what's going to make you successful. It's not going to be something where you can overthrow Steam overnight. And, you know, there's some rumblings about PlayStation starting their own storefront potentially. And sure, God of War is big, and people will download a PlayStation Store launcher for God of War and for some of the marquee PlayStation titles. But I think sometimes these publishers have grandiose expectations of just what their IPs are. Sure, people like these IPs, but at the end of the day, there are so many games available that I think a quality storefront and a storefront that's in line with what they want matters more than any one specific game for a lot of people. And again, there are games that will supersede that, but it's few and far between. If Grand Theft Auto 6 eventually is a Rockstar launcher exclusive, you know, I'm sure it would do well, but you're talking about a game that would come out on a delayed release. And again, we're talking about GTA 6. That's like upper echelon tier video game, and even Red Dead 2, timed exclusive on Epic Game Store and the Rockstar launcher. Ultimately, that came out on Steam, and at this point, most of the copies are sold via Steam. It's just that exclusives are always going to be the thing that people look at to prop up a storefront, and I think we have to come to the conclusion when the storefront itself is lacking so much, exclusives are only going to take you so far. Where it comes to consoles, I do think exclusives matter more when it comes to just straight Xbox versus PlayStation, because the feature set is so similar. Like, it's not like PlayStation in terms of what features it offers inherently is so much better than Xbox or vice versa. For the most part, the marquee games are available on both platforms. The biggest games are Call of Duty, FIFA, NBA, etc., etc. So you need something to differentiate the consoles from one another and make people pick one or the other. When Steam is just such a stronger platform, people are just naturally going to go on that, and exclusives aren't going to be as big of a factor, I believe. I think for Xbox versus PlayStation it is, but, you know, Xbox is kind of going out of the system. You know, exclusives at this point, when it comes to PlayStation versus Xbox, matters less because Xbox is just bringing their games on over to PlayStation. So that point is kind of moot as well. But in the console landscape, I do personally believe exclusives have a lot of value. And by all means, PlayStation, if you want to, you know, in-house make your games and, you know, have your Naughty Dog games, have your Sucker Punch games, great. I'm just not high on the timed exclusivities and all that. And I've always been against timed exclusivities. I hated it, you know, when so many games were timed exclusive. Rise of the Tomb Raider, remember when that was an Xbox timed exclusive? I hated that. Remember when FF7 Remake was a timed PlayStation exclusive? I hated that. And then, bro, the FF7 exclusivity was such nonsense because it was PlayStation timed exclusive, then it was Epic Game Store timed exclusive, then it finally came out on Steam. Like, they got their effing mileage out of that game. Like, relax there, buddy. And now we're getting FF7 Remake Part 3 on all platforms right out the gate. It's just, I can talk about this so much because I feel like exclusives is such a big part of the storefronts, at least, you know, for the Epic Game Store and the storefronts that tried to pop up and compete with Steam. And I just think you're losing the game there. I think GOG has the right idea when it has an identity, but at the same time, Steam has this perceived monopoly because they haven't abused their leadership in the marketplace and taken advantage of the consumer. Could you imagine if Steam implemented some sort of subscription service? Oh, if you want to get all of the features out of Steam, give us $5 a month. People would hate that, but that'll do it for me. Let me know all of your thoughts in the comment section down below. I know I went kind of long, but curious to hear what you guys think. As always, thanks for watching, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Peace out. Hey, what's going on, guys? Mush here again. Hope you enjoyed the video. As you guys might know, YouTube's notification system is sometimes a little bit wonky, even if you're subscribed to the channel. Maybe you're not abundantly aware that I uploaded a video. To remedy that situation, make sure you hit the bell notification button. This way, whenever I upload a new video, and I try to upload as consistently as possible, you will be notified directly of the upload, and you can watch it as soon as it goes live. I would really appreciate if you guys hit that button so you can stay up to date with all of the content I'm posting. But as always, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace out.